Before the arrival of Europeans, North America was home to a vast and diverse array of native civilizations. From the monumental earthworks of the Mississippian culture in the southeast, to the intricate cliff dwellings of the ancestral Puebloans in the southwest, these societies developed complex social structures, advanced agricultural techniques, and rich spiritual traditions. They lived in harmony with the land, each tribe and nation possessing its own unique language, customs, and way of life. In the Great Plains, tribes like the Lakota followed the great bison herds, their lives intricately woven with the rhythms of nature. In the Pacific Northwest, communities thrived on the bounty of the sea, creating masterful art and elaborate ceremonies. Their world was one of deep connection to the earth and to the generations that came before them. The arrival of European explorers in the late 15th and early 16th centuries marked the beginning of a profound and irreversible change. Driven by a desire for new trade routes, wealth, and discovery, ships from Spain, France, and England made landfall on the continent's shores. This first contact was a complex encounter of two vastly different worlds. Initially, interactions were often a mixture of curiosity, trade, and cautious diplomacy. However, these encounters also brought conflict and disease, which had a devastating impact on indigenous populations, altering the landscape of North America forever. In the 17th century, England began to establish permanent colonies along the Atlantic coast. Jamestown, founded in 1607, and Plymouth, settled by the Pilgrims in 1620, were among the earliest. Life in these colonies was harsh and demanding. Settlers faced unfamiliar climates, the constant threat of starvation, and the immense challenge of building a new society from scratch. They developed economies based on agriculture, with tobacco becoming a vital cash crop in the south and small farms defining the north. Over time, 13 distinct colonies emerged, each with its own government, culture, and character, yet all under the authority of the British Crown. By the mid-18th century, tensions began to grow between the American colonies and Great Britain. The colonists, having developed a unique identity and a desire for greater self-governance, grew resentful of British policies, particularly those that imposed taxes without their consent. Acts like the Stamp Act and the Townshend Acts sparked widespread protest and resistance. The sentiment that their rights as Englishmen were being violated fueled a movement toward independence. The Boston Tea Party was a pivotal act of defiance, leading Britain to enact stricter measures, which only served to unite the colonies further in their opposition. The simmering tensions finally erupted into open conflict in 1775, beginning the American Revolution. What started as a struggle for rights soon evolved into a war for independence. On July 4, 1796, the Second Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence, a revolutionary document that proclaimed the colonies' separation from Britain and articulated the fundamental principles of liberty and self-government. The war was long and arduous, with the Continental Army, led by General George Washington, facing the formidable power of the British military. With crucial assistance from France, the colonists ultimately secured their victory at the Battle of Yorktown in 1781. With independence won, the newly sovereign states faced the challenge of creating a stable and effective national government. Their first attempt, the Articles of Confederation, proved too weak to address the country's needs. In 1787, delegates convened in Philadelphia to draft a new framework. The result was the United States Constitution, a groundbreaking document that established a federal republic with a system of checks and balances among three branches of government. After its ratification, George Washington was unanimously elected as the first president, and the young nation began its great experiment in democracy. The 19th century was defined by the nation's relentless expansion westward, fueled by the idea of manifest destiny, the belief that the United States was destined to stretch from coast to coast. Settlers, explorers, and traders pushed into the vast territories beyond the Appalachian Mountains. The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 nearly doubled the size of the country overnight. This expansion brought the nation into conflict with Native American tribes who were forcibly displaced from their ancestral lands, and with Mexico, leading to the Mexican-American War and the acquisition of vast territories in the Southwest. The journey west was one of both opportunity and great hardship. While the nation expanded, the deeply divisive issue of slavery tore at its very fabric. The economy of the southern states was built upon the forced labor of enslaved African Americans, an institution that stood in stark contrast to the nation's professed ideals of liberty. The debate over whether new territories should permit slavery intensified sectional tensions between the North and the South. A series of compromises failed to resolve the conflict, and with the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, who opposed the expansion of slavery, Southern states began to secede from the Union, leading to the outbreak of the Civil War in 1861. The war was the deadliest in American history, a brutal conflict that ultimately preserved the Union and led to the abolition of slavery. Following the Civil War, the nation entered the Reconstruction era, a turbulent period aimed at rebuilding the South and integrating newly freed African Americans into society. Constitutional amendments were passed to grant citizenship and voting rights to black men. However, the promise of Reconstruction was short-lived. Resistance in the South, coupled with waning political will in the North, led to the withdrawal of federal troops and the rise of discriminatory laws that enforced racial segregation and disenfranchisement, creating a system of inequality that would persist for generations. The late 19th century witnessed a dramatic transformation of the American economy and society. The Second Industrial Revolution brought about unprecedented technological innovation, with advancements in steel, electricity, and transportation. Railroads connected the country, factories multiplied, and cities grew at an astonishing rate. This period, often called the Gilded Age, saw the accumulation of immense fortunes but also widespread poverty and difficult working conditions. Millions of immigrants from Southern and Eastern Europe arrived, seeking opportunity and a new life. They filled the factories and built the cities, contributing to the nation's rich cultural tapestry, but also facing hardship and discrimination. In 1917, after years of maintaining neutrality, the United States entered World War I. The conflict in Europe had been raging since 1914, and American involvement tipped the balance of power in favor of the Allied forces. The war effort mobilized the entire nation, with millions of soldiers sent overseas and the home front organized to support production. The war's end brought the hope of a new international order, championed by President Woodrow Wilson, but it also ushered in a period of social and political unease, including the Red Scare and social tensions that marked the beginning of the Roaring Twenties. The prosperity of the 1920s came to an abrupt and devastating end with the stock market crash of 1929, which plunged the nation and the world into the Great Depression. It was the most severe economic crisis in American history. Banks failed, businesses closed, and unemployment soared, leaving millions of families in desperate poverty. In response, President Franklin D. Roosevelt launched the New Deal, a series of ambitious programs and reforms designed to provide relief, promote recovery, and reform the economic system. The New Deal fundamentally expanded the role of the federal government in the lives of ordinary citizens. As the nation slowly recovered from the Depression, the world was once again descending into war. The United States initially remained neutral in World War II, but was drawn into the conflict after the attack on Pearl Harbor in December 1941. The nation undertook a massive mobilization of its industrial and military might. Millions of men and women served in the armed forces, fighting in the European and Pacific theaters. On the home front, American factories became the arsenal of democracy, producing an overwhelming supply of weapons and goods. The war ended in 1945 after the use of atomic bombs on Japan, leaving the United States as a dominant global superpower. The end of World War II did not bring lasting peace, but instead gave rise to the Cold War, a prolonged period of geopolitical tension between the United States and the Soviet Union. This ideological struggle between democracy and communism dominated international affairs for decades. It was a conflict waged through proxy wars, an arms race, and a space race. The fear of nuclear annihilation cast a long shadow over daily life, while the nation engaged in conflicts in Korea and Vietnam, deeply dividing American society. During the Cold War, a powerful movement for social justice emerged at home. The civil rights movement challenged the system of racial segregation and discrimination that had been in place for nearly a century. Through nonviolent protests, marches, and acts of civil disobedience, activists like Martin Luther King Jr. fought for equality. Their courage and sacrifice led to landmark legislation, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, which dismantled legal segregation and began the long process of achieving true racial equality. The late 20th century was a time of significant social and political change. The Vietnam War and the Watergate scandal eroded public trust in government. The country experienced economic challenges, including inflation and energy crises, but also witnessed the rise of a new technological revolution with the advent of the personal computer and the Internet. The Cold War came to a dramatic end with the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, leaving the United States as the world's sole superpower and ushering in a new era of globalization. The dawn of the 21st century brought new challenges and transformations. The terrorist attacks of September 11, 2001, profoundly impacted the nation, leading to wars in Afghanistan and Iraq and a new focus on national security. The digital revolution continued to reshape society, the economy, and daily life in ways previously unimaginable. The country has continued to grapple with complex issues, from economic inequality and political polarization to questions of national identity. Through it all, the United States continues its long and often difficult journey, a nation forever shaped by the forces of its past and the enduring hope for its future.